Nosebleed episode tayo mamaya, may math lesson tayo, may statistics lesson tayo mamaya. We'll talk about that. In the meantime, Ami, ano pang mga headlines?
Siyempre, dun sa weekend pa rin nangyari, no? Yung pag-uusapan natin ngayon, mamaya-maya, yung bigla surprise visit of President Marcos and his son and cousin, of course, si Speaker Romualdez, sa Singapore. Pero yun ang pag-uusapan natin mamaya, di ba?
So, sabi ni Ed, may statement ba?
No?
Yeah, I understand meron ng vlog si Pangulong Marcos eh. I just heard about it dun sa kabilang programa.
But essentially, is it different from what
It's
Press Secretary Angela said?
As what Secretary Angela said,
Okay.
that it was a productive trip and he will report to the public what happened
Oo nga.
eventually.
Pero the thing here, katulad ng pinag-usapan natin kanina, Ed, sa The Big Story, whether panindigan nila na private trip to or they say na working trip to, on both sides, maraming mga tanong na kailangan sagutin.
Also kasi may konteksto yun na it comes just a few days after nilagasa yung Sen. Luzon. And as a result of that, we may have an increase in prices by 20% sa agricultural products. And he is also the Agriculture Secretary.
And yung lahat ng usapan na yan and all these points about the optics of it also comes just a few days before everybody assesses the first 100 days of President
100
Marcos.
days.
Oh,
Yes.
diba? So anyway, we will precisely be speaking about that when we return. We speak to our first guest after this short break. Keep it here on One News. people are still talking about President Marcos' unannounced trip to Singapore over the weekend. Well, the palace says it was a productive trip. No other detail was mentioned. Let's talk about it some more with political science professor Jean Franco. Good evening and welcome back to the Chiefs, Prof.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Ma'am.
Hey,
Good evening to everyone.
First of all, as far as you're concerned, I asked this of Ed kanina sa the big story. With Malacanang and now the president basically saying that it was productive. Does that necessarily answer the question of whether or not this was a private or a working trip?
No. Because under what metrics are they measuring the so-called productive visit, no?
No, but even without going into, magkano ba, o may napirmahan ba, and so on. But just the very suggestion that I went there were results. Does that automatically imbue this with the nature of, this? I went there on it was basically a working trip.
Kasi dapat yung mga statements na ganyan, especially naging controversial yung trip, to my mind dapat mas klaro, mas transparent. Kasi from the very beginning, as you said in the beginning of the program, na it was an unannounced trip. And that related na lang yung, what you call this, the explanation, diba? I think it took them 1 or 2 days before they responded when they were seeing that there were people who were already criticizing the trip.
Merong Facebook post si President Marcos. Sabi niya, it was fulfilling to have been invited alongside several dignitaries and to have met new business friends who showed that they are ready and willing to invest in the Philippines. And he will be sharing more details now, later. So what do you think of that post?
Well for, sa akin kasi, hindi naman siya CEO. He is not a head of a company who can wine and dine with potential investors or potential partners. So, unang-una, dapat may transparency. Pangalawa, documentation of whatever they talked about, which would happen in visits that are official in nature.
Pero ma'am,
Sabi
it
niya pa,
wouldn't
they
be
say
easy.
that playing golf daw. Playing golf is the best way to drum up business, but I say it's Formula One. What a productive weekend. Yun ang kanyang Facebook post.
Yeah. So it's really it's also very evident that they're trying to control the damage. From the criticisms that have been hurled on social media and in various fora.
Ma'am, but let me also try to...
damage, how damaging do you think this is, considering that, it still holds sway over a majority of Filipinos? And maybe this is just an opportunity that his opponents are grabbing in order to point out whatever criticisms they have about him.
Yeah. For me, he's really confident about his mandate. That's one. Or confident about how they can sort of spin this trip or whatever the nature of the trip was, and to the extent that people will still believe the spin. But then what's very clear to me is that there is already a pattern. And that is why people are really criticizing the administration.
A pattern of what?
Of
pattern
of leisurely activities that have nothing to do with governance. Of course, like any ordinary employee, presidents are also entitled to work-life balance. But then, kailangan may work bago, kailangan work-life balance. And yeah, so may pattern and this is not the first time that we've seen him doing other things other than working at the height of, various challenges that we are facing. So people, I mean, you cannot fault people for trying to look for empathy from him, di ba?
But could it just have been the timing of it? The fact that we're coming off Typhoon Carding and ang laki ng damage to agriculture. If this had happened at, sabihin na natin, peacetime, for lack of a better word, no, would it have incurred as much flack?
Sa akin pareho. You know why? Because this is something that we've not seen in previous presidents. We have seen Duterte doing videokes, pero roadside videokes. Si Pinoy was fond of di ba? Guns ba or
Cars.
Video games.
shooting range or video games.
Yeah.
But it was never an in-your-face scenario, no? Like that we are facing right now. So parang, I don't think, even if this happened in the context of a post-typhoon scenario, mapapansin pa rin. Kasi nga naging pattern na since day one.
Ma'am, let me try to look at it from another side of the fence. Hindi ba madaling bigyan ng veneer of officiality itong ganito mga pagkakataon? Kasi in the end, he is the chief executive. He's the chief architect of foreign policy. So pwede siya mag-abroad for any reason that he may he may state. He's also the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. So pwede niyang gamitin technically ang mga sasakyan ng armed forces, including the Gulf Stream. At
saka to the professor's point kanina, he is in fact CEO of the country.
He's also the chief salesman of the country. So in that sense, it's relatively easy for Malacanang to sidestep any legal issues over whether or not something was inappropriate or not even inappropriate, illegal.
But the issues, but the factors you said are precisely the reasons why his trip can also be criticized.
Yeah, that's true.
Because you need to, if you're using government resources, then there has to be a reason, no? Government employees, before they can go abroad, they have to have a travel authority. The reason for the travel has to be very clear because it's an official travel. So even if it's for a leisurely activity, optics-wise, madami na rin nagsasabi that it doesn't look good, no? Because it's not as if it's an ordinary event or nanood lang siya ng sine sa Singapore. It's parang it's something that only the wealthiest can have access to, especially yung ano niya yata, no, kung saan siya nakaupo or ano. I'm not very familiar with Grand Prix, sorry. Yun. So,
Professor, nabanggit nyo nga yung optics. I want to go there, di ba? I mean, let's talk about the optics because it's framed on either side by two big things. One is yung katatapos lang na bagyo, di ba? Tas maraming na delubyo doon. And then on the other hand, at the end of this week, people are counting down the few days remaining before we say, 100 days na. Diba? And that's always a milestone just to say, okay, grade na natin, kamusta? And this coming in between those two events where, on the one hand, after the typhoon, people are saying, anong ginawa ng Pangulo, given especially that he's Agriculture Secretary, and then 100 days, anong ginawa ng Pangulo in 100 days. How big a deal is this, the optics of this, to that coming assessment?
Yeah, it's precisely the context in which people are criticizing the trip and the nature of the trip because, malapit na yung 100 days and then we just experience a huge typhoon and there's also the inflation. So aside from the disasters, kung hindi mo pa ba pwedeng tawagin disaster yung inflation, yung peso-dollar rate. So and usually during uncertain times, people look for empathy, no, in their leaders, and we're not seeing it right now.
Pero ma'am, do you think the public can make the connections between, for example, or between Carding, the projected 20% spike in agriculture prices, and the president's absence to attend a Formula One racing event so he can rub elbows with investors? In the end, do you think this will make any dent in his popularity?
Yeah, oo nga eh. Kasi alam mo, there's another parallel universe no, that's happening, no? People in the same way that happened also during the elections, no? Merong ability, no? I mean, it's very much unlike what we've experienced during martial law, when there's talagang kailangan tutukan ng baril o repression, ikulong yung media para nagre-reveal ng katotohanan. But then right now hindi na eh. It's parang because of social media, people can hire the best spin doctors, the best vloggers to to spin and to have some form of an alternative universe, no, to which the supporters are exposed to every day. So it's kasi I've seen the yung sa UN, yung speech niya, iba ang framing doon sa sa universe nila.
Ma'am, for example, if I use the president's analogy, sabi niya, people say that playing golf is the best way to drum up business. I say it's Formula One. If you use that analogy, would it be acceptable, for example, for the president to fly off to play golf in Scotland? I mean,
I don't think so.
if I push that analogy forward, would that be any more acceptable?
No. Because that's not the way presidents should, make deals. Sabi ko nga, hindi siya businessman. At kahit nga CEOs, accountable ka sa of private businesses, accountable ka sa board, di ba? Sa stockholders. But then, or kung may-ari ka man, pamilya kayo, may-ari ka ng isang business sa pamilya mo, pero siya kasi accountable siya doon sa more than 100 million Filipinos. So hindi pwedeng maganap yung mga deals ng hindi mo kasama yung trade secretary mo, yung 'di ba, yung people who will work out these things on the ground.
Sir, may isa pang tanong ngayon kasi ang isang malaking component ng problema parang itinago ng Malacanang, di ba? In denial sila for about a day
Yeah.
Tapos na lang nung kinonfirm ng mga post ni Singapore Prime Minister. Pero ang tinatanong ngayon, talaga bang deliberate yung pagtatago o talaga lang hindi nasabihan si Press Secretary? Yun ang tanong-tanong ngayon. Was she kept out of the loop? Talaga lang hindi siya nasabihan. Kasi nangyari na din yung remember kay Harry Roque with President Duterte na sumama loob niya, hindi daw siya sinasabihan. Bigla-biglang nawala yung kanyang principal. What do you think? Anong basa mo?
Yeah, because it was kind of weird that parang a day passed and the country was very confused as to what the trip was all about, and then naunahan na, Siyempre people nadagdagan yung, because of that uncertainty and because of the unknown factor, people began to talk, people began to criticize it, and then parang so tuloy kahit ano pa yung sabihin, nagpumukha talagang damage control, Yung nangyayari.
What do you say to those who are probably saying, oh, so what's the big deal? He's back. He spent his own money. He's entitled to a day off, even if he's the president. And, well, he's back in business, doing what he's supposed to do. So why are you even talking about this and criticizing? What's the point?
Yeah, I know that some people remain as such, but then The Philippines is, is still reeling from the pandemic, and we've just had a typhoon, and we elected a president with such huge expectations because of the overwhelming mandate given to him by his supporters. So I don't think people should be faulted for criticizing what seems to be a pattern now,
Yeah.
of behavior from the president.
But Professor, beyond the optics also and how the intangibles of it, let's talk about what is tangible and what should be at the very least documentable and reportable. Whether this was a private trip or a working trip, just by mere fact that this involved the president going abroad, what are the inevitable costs? As in peso terms, dollar terms, what are inevitably ginastosan yan? Diba? I mean, for example, I was telling Ed kanina, it's impossible that he traveled, he took his leave on his own. At the very least, may kasamang PSG. Diba? Parang hindi mo naman ma-imagine. Diba? What are the costs that should be quantifiable and that are inevitable every time a president, let's even grant it, every time a president travels abroad, even on personal time?
Yeah, yung the use of
The Gulf Stream.
Philippine airports, yung gasoline, yung what else?
That's the 2 billion peso jet that we acquired in 2020.
Yeah, yung the use of that, I don't know what else, yung meals ba sinabi? Yung meals ng PSG.
Actually, in per diem.
May per diem yan sa government. Pagka official travel, may per diem, di ba? So baka kasama rin yun.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, let me just push Roby's question a little bit more forward. Kasi we checked two flight tracking websites, radarbox.com and flightaware.com. FlightAware, for example, is the biggest flight tracking system. And they verified that the Gulfstream G280 of RPP-1, that's the presidential jet, landed in Singapore on Saturday and came back to Manila very, very early this morning. So it was there for at least one night, going to 2 nights. Of course, we don't know if the president was there. The president was riding it. Nobody's confirming that yet. But what are the chances it was there for repair just for one night?
Okay, that's another thing to explain. Kung hindi siya yun, di ba? Para sino gumamit yan?
Plus also, the public has the right to know about the whereabouts of the president, no? Unless it's a national security issue, di ba?
Well, national security issue kapag wala yung presidente dito, di ba? We will
At
need
walang caretaker.
we will need a
Na-appoint.
caretaker. Sino yung caretaker?
Yeah, exactly. So these are the things that should bother people, no? Mahirap naman na, palalagpasin yung mga ganito.
Would it have been better if he had announced it and said, I'm going to be watching the Singapore Grand Prix? Would that have been a better optic?
But would you announce it 2 days after Kanding?
Pero talagang sobrang yun, pag ginawa niya. But then, kasi yung parang naging sobrang secret, it fueled a lot of talks from some sectors.
But it's a damn if you do and a damn if you don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Precisely, right. Yeah, so baka naman mas malaking damage nga pag sinabi niyang, okay, people, I'm gonna take the weekend off. I'm just gonna fly to Singapore, and maybe along the way, I'm gonna, consolidate whatever deals we had begun in my last trip. Would that have been a better way to package it? I just wonder if it's just optics we're talking about here, which I'm sure it's not, right? But
exactly. I also want to know whether the Department of Foreign Affairs has any statement about this trip.
so far, none.
Wala. It's out of the loop. Well, we don't know if they were out of the loop or
We're just keeping quiet about it.
Because in terms of keeping quiet, di ba, parang we have to qualify that. They weren't just quiet for 1 or 2 days. Because unang lumabas yung rumors 3 days before Formula 1, di ba? People were already talking about it. The people were giving them the benefit of the doubt na until it happens, hindi naman siguro. Diba? So
Yeah.
Malacanang was silent for much longer than during the race and after. But anyway, final question na lang, Prof. So what can the President and Malacanang do now? Like we said, this is the last thing they need heading into us marking the first 100 days. The last thing you need is that for this to be the dominant topic and people speculating about the judgment of the President. Yeah? What can he do in these, remaining 3 or 4 days before we say, okay, 100 days, let's have the first assessment of everyone?
Magandang tanong yan, Robbie, but my sense is that they're really emboldened by the 31 million mandate and the fact that they can spin, events such as this. That's why they're not even thinking that it is something that can affect them in the long term. That's what I'm concerned about, actually.
You don't think appearing to be compelled to have to come up with some story, any story, kahit manipis, you don't think that sort of signifies to them na, teka muna, kailangan tayong magsalita dito?
Yes, but to their base, I don't think they want to explain anything. They think that these people will still believe them. But then,
Hindi ba dapat isipin din yung 22 million who did not vote for them?
yeah, and that's precisely why they did that. But I doubt if the 22 million who did not vote for them will buy that explanation. Diba? And sa akin kasi, may tipping point ang Pinoy. I don't know if you look at our history, diba? Because this is something that we've seen in the past. During his father's administration. And what I'm saying is that pag ganito pa, in the next 6 years, medyo I mean, it's difficult to predict things, of course, no? But then, I think mahirapan siyang ma-maintain yung in the same way that Duterte was able to have that more than 80% support from the people. Nahihirapan siya. Because eventually along the, in the long run, people will realize that he's very different from, what they perceived him to be during the elections.
Okay, Professor Jean Encinas Franco, ma'am, maraming salamat po.
Thank you po.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye.
And we'll start up another conversation after the break. Please stay with us.
Over 400 lucky bettors are now $500,000 pesos richer after guessing the winning combination in the 655 Grand Lotto draw. However, speculations of the draw being rigged have prompted calls for an investigation on the matter.
Minority Senators Coco Pimentel and Risa Hontiveros also want to investigate the results. Pimentel intends to submit a resolution to investigate PCSO's gaming activities. He also wants guidance from statisticians and mathematicians over the probability of such incident.
If you just give me an incomplete context into just telling me that for the 655, 433 winners for the jackpot, I'll just think about that and say, well, that is so highly unlikely. However, if you give me that the context is that the winning numbers were 9, 18, 27, 36, 45, and 54, it's a very human thing to do to select those numbers being multiples of 9.
Since this is a game of chance, there is no right, there is no wrong. Alam niyo yun, no? And in this case nga, tinamaan nila yon. Nag-pay off yung kanilang loyalty, kaya lang marami nga lang talaga sila. We have found nothing wrong. In fact, it's a natural occurrence, no? Na may mga nag-aalaga at may maraming nananalo kapag tinamaan yun. So, wala kaming nakikitang babaguhin doon. And we are in fact pleased na marami ang nanalo actually, lalo't magpapasko.
Thank you for staying with the Chiefs. From Lotto numbers to COVID cases, let's talk probabilities with OCTA Research Fellow Dr. Guido David. Sir, magandang gabi and welcome back to the Chiefs.
Good evening.
Lotto na lang.
Hi, good evening, the Chiefs, Roby, Ed, Luchi, and Ami.
Good evening, sir. Sir, ito kasi si Roby, may inaalagang numero eh. Hindi tumatama-tama kahit kailan eh.
Yun yung numero ko eh, tumama. Hindi ako pumusta.
Sir, anyway, well, to begin with, try not to dazzle us too much with numbers. Pero of course, everybody wants to know, anong probability na magkakaroon ka ng gantong multiples of 9, all of the multiples of 9, and so many winners all in one draw?
Sige, let's dissect the numbers. Yung probability of a winning combination is there are a total of almost 29 million combination ng 6 numbers from 1 to 55. So yung probability of winning for a winning combination is 1 out of 29 million. Ngayon, yung pattern na lumabas na multiples of 9, it may seem unique, pero in the scheme of probability, it's no more likely or less likely than any other combination. Kumbaga, pare-pareho lang chances of winning, of a winning combination. That's a statistical fact. Na it will be the same. Kahit if I give you a random sequence like 3, 15, 14, 9, 26, 54, which seems random, pareho lang sila.
Teka, pakiulit, Prof. Pakiulit. 3, 14.
pero the fact na 433 sila, I think that's the unusual part.
That is the unusual part that many people are surprised about kasi we don't usually get that many winners. And I will admit na hindi naman ako pumupusta sa Lotto. So I am not familiar with betting patterns na ginagamit ng mga tao. Yung sinabi kanina ni Roby na may inaalagaan, I'm not actually familiar. I have the naive notion na yung mga tao, they pick numbers and the next time, they will choose a different set of numbers. Pero apparently, meron
Pero actually, Prof, I'll take on that because sa tingin ko, ito lang yung kaya ko explain sa lahat ng to. But people do choose. Actually, yung dun sa 433, that for me was the easier thing to understand. Because obviously, there are people who play the Lotto and a lot of them are superstitious people. And a lot of them will therefore say, oh, puro even numbers lang ang ilalagay ko. Or ano ka. And then I can imagine people, kaya nga nasabi ni Stat Guy, di ba, na it's a very human thing to do, to try to use patterns or to divine patterns or to impose patterns on something that's very random. So when people say, make it their habit na multiples of 9, one, I can understand a person doing that. And then I can understand them being surprised na ang dami pala kaming pare-pareho mag-isip. 433 pala kami in this round. Ano? If we frame it that way, does that make it more sensible?
It actually makes it more sensible kasi in fact one of my colleagues, si Professor Rabahante from UPLB, he
Nanalo?
cited hindi na nanalo. Pero I actually know someone, or I know someone who knows someone na someone parang 2 degrees of freedom. The someone I know may kilala siyang nanalo, and I trust that person na sinasabi niya na parang legit naman. Pero si Professor Abahati, ang sinasabi niya is may sinite siyang paper na merong mga patterns are actually more likely to be picked by bettors. So kasama dito yung ganyan nga multiples of 9. So I think it is maybe more possible na 400 people, more than 400 people chose that pattern kasi it makes more sense to people than a random sequence like what I gave you na parang wala namang sense to most people siguro, except siguro someone who have birthdays on those dates or something, birthdays ng mga relatives nila. So without any biases, yung probability that I computed for 433 winning lottery players is 1 out of 10 to the 1,224 zeros. So ganon kaliit yung probability. Yeah.
Oh, but that's
it's so small na we can't even fathom how small it is kasi the universe has only 10 to the 80 molecules nung hinanap ko. So I mean it's even much smaller than 1 molecule out of the whole universe. So so ganun siya. Pero introducing biases may change the calculations. I agree. And what I have to say about this is whenever something does not happen according to what most people expect. If something happens in a casino na kunyari, an example is tumama yung slot machine, sunod-sunod, magkakatabi, tumama sila. This won't happen often. Maybe it can happen in theory, pero it's not impossible. Pero if it happens, what will next happen is there will likely be an audit or an inquiry or investigation to explain what happened. And there should be nothing wrong with an audit. It does not imply na may anomaly naman. It just means na it didn't happen according to expectations. So can we know why that was the case? And with the audit, I think if there's nothing, if everything's above board, then it should restore our confidence in the lottery.
Talking about above board, do you think that in the lottery itself, yung talagang kinukuha yung bola, is there a chance naman na nadadaya? Wala naman, di ba, Prof?
I'm not familiar actually with the process kasi I don't I don't watch the Lotto. Pero
yeah, but
right.
If you look at the video now, for example, di ba yan, no? Flying balls with different numbers. So, hindi naman siguro yun naririg, right?
I hope not. Hindi naman siguro. At least based on that. Pero syempre, again, it's about yung confidence of the people, and if there's some doubt caused by some events, then I think it's fair naman to have to at least double check everything and show everyone na wala naman. Even the most improbable events, pag nangyari na siya, well, nangyari na siya. And it's not impossible, it's just improbable, pero it can still happen.
Sir, ganito lang, kung kayo pinatawag ng Senado, hindi para sa COVID, pero para dito sa Lotto, anong sasabihin niyo kay Senator Coco Pimentel?
Well, I think it's something na, based on probabilities, it's not likely to happen. It could be, the probability is very small, but it's not impossible. And but we cannot say that there's an anomaly based on probabilities lang. So if there's going to be an inquiry or an audit, then they will check the methods, they will check maybe the winners, and that will be the one that will say for sure if there's anything out of the ordinary doon sa process.
I mean, doon sa point na follow-up ko lang yung tanong ni Ed. If it's basically, walang pupuntahan kung ang pag-uusapan natin is probabilities because you'll basically just say, look, pare-pareho na may probabilities. Then what are the more constructive questions that our legislators should be asking that can actually lead them to something na, okay, that's a more that's a more logical and useful question.
Yeah, kasi you're right, Robbie. When we're just hearing the numbers and the perception, it can it can confuse us then, or it can make people have some doubt about the results, and that's very valid. I mean, what can the legislators ask? And of course, they can ask about siguro the process, yung calibration ng system ng Lotto system, yung getting the Powerballs or the 6 numbers out, and about the winners. They can check the winners if and they can also check about the historical betting frequencies, because this is also very important, and it will most likely adjust the calculations that I have made, which is unbiased. Kasi the reality is, totoo naman, when people bet, they are biased to certain patterns. So baka it's more likely that some patterns will have more people betting on those patterns. So if we have the historical data, we can actually show na, hindi naman pala ganun ka improbable. Of course, the probability of a number being selected is still 1 out of 29 million, just like any other number that can be selected.
Sige, Professor, maiba naman tayo, ibang numero naman to. Tumataas na uli yung COVID all metrics, What's the situation ba? How worried should we be?
Well, akala ko nakalimutan na natin yung COVID. It actually, tumataas yung positivity rate sa Metro Manila. It's at 19%. It's not increasing naman in the whole country. So there are only a few provinces like NCR, Rizal, Cavite, Bulacan na tumataas yung positivity rate. It's not alarming naman at this time because the healthcare utilization is still low. Pero at the same time, it's better for us to inform the public na tumataas in these areas so they can be guided accordingly. Lalo na optional face mask, if cases are rising, it should be more highly recommended that they wear face masks even outdoors, especially yung mga may comorbidities, the elderly, to protect them from severe COVID. Pero in many other provinces of the country, pababa pa rin naman. They're still at low risk in places like Cebu, in Davao, in Iloilo.
Pero you are factoring in na yung underreporting na puro antigen na lang. Yung iba nga hindi na nagpapatesting
Actually, Ami, there's a severe underreporting now kasi hindi na tumataas yung testing natin even when the positivity rate is rising. Kasi we're almost at 20% positivity rate sa Metro Manila. That's actually a high positivity rate. And nung previous wave, well, it's the same wave, pero yung previous peak, noong August, we reached mga 17.5% positivity rate. Tapos bumababa. Ngayon tumataas na naman So there's a severe underreporting. I think I mentioned ko before na we estimate the number of true infections could be about 20 times higher than what's reported. So all over the country, the underreporting is severe. Pero the good news is, mababa pa rin naman yung healthcare utilization. So I mean, kasi yung hospitals, even if there's underreporting, we will see an increase in hospitalizations dapat if there's really a high number of severe cases. I mean, what this means is a lot of cases are, there are many infections, pero most of them will be mild and asymptomatic na hindi na nagre-require ng hospitalization.
So anong trend? I mean, moving into, November when schools start face-to-face classes, and then December when there will be more people in the malls, and of course the celebration of the season. What do you foresee to be the trend?
Well, right now, Luchi, yes, we're having an increase in cases in Metro Manila. There might be provinces which will suddenly see a spike in cases, and that's because as more people are going out because of schools, because of the Burr months, there could be more clustering na nakikita natin. Kumbaga, it happened in Metro Manila. I won't be surprised if it starts happening in other provinces, pero hindi siya sabay-sabay. We're not sure why there's a resurgence in cases and infections in Metro Manila. It could be a new subvariant, because we're also monitoring new subvariants all in other parts of the world. In fact, I think in UK they're starting to see an increase again in cases. There could be a new subvariant causing that. Hopefully hindi na magka-increase pa, but I won't be surprised if we see an increase in cases in other parts of the country.
Are there any events in the past weeks or months, events including policy changes now? So whether it's making mask wearing mandatory or starting to, opening up traffic, opening up malls, whatever. Are there any events that stand out that you can now say that this one really had an impact?
Well, so far we're not sure about yung optional face mask, Robbie. And again, in fairness, although cases are rising in NCR, we're not seeing a rise in cases in Cebu, for example, or in Iloilo, or in Davao. In many areas where optional na rin yung face mask. And in fact, even in Metro Manila, when I go out, I estimate siguro mga 50 to 60% of people at least are still wearing face masks even outdoors. So I think mask compliance is still relatively high in Metro Manila. Yes, at the time na nagkaroon ng face-to-face classes, it may have caused a spike in infections, because what we are hearing is that some schools actually had to go back to online classes because of a clustering of cases. And that's to be expected, because if you have a clustering of cases, the calibration or the response is babalik muna sa online classes, because they can't have people with infections or children with infections going to school. So bumabalik sila sa online. And when they get infections from schools, usually naiuwi nila sa household nila, where the rate of transmission is very high. So it could be partly an effect of the Burr months, or partly an effect of the face-to-face. Pero at the same time then, we're not seeing the increased infections in other parts of the country na meron na ring face-to-face. So it's not clear if that is actually the event that we're talking about, Robbie. So in other words, in a nutshell, ang sinasabi ko, walang clear na we can say na this event is what caused the rise in infections. It may look confusing, pero the evidence is that we're seeing the rise in NCR, but not in other parts of the country. So maybe it is this, or maybe it is that. Right now, we're just guessing. One other possibility is, sabi ni Father Nick, it could be the waning immunity, but it could also be the new subvariants, which we're starting to see in the rest of the world.
Pero actually, pati yung private hospitals, nag-aalala na eh. Sabi nila, they are suggesting already na i-restore na nga yung outdoor mask mandate. Are you giving inputs there ang OCTA Research on that proposal?
Well, it's still optional, pero I think there should be, the Department of Health should have indicators or triggers na pag tumatas yung cases, there should be a point when we should say na maybe we should make it mandatory again. I can't say what those triggers are. We made a proposal, but they could give their own triggers. Kasi definitely, although we want the mask mandate to be optional, there should be a level. I'll give an extreme example. Siyempre, pag napuno na yung hospital, 70%, definitely, people should be a lot more careful, and they should probably be wearing face masks even outdoors. So there should be levels that we can set na masasabi natin, kailangan ibalik yung face mask. It shouldn't be arbitrary. We should set these indicators or triggers, and then pag nangyari, then we should follow the protocols.
Okay, Professor Guido David of OCTA Research. Sir, maraming salamat.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
po.
you, Prof.
Thank you, the Chiefs. Good evening.
And that's it for the Chiefs. We hope it was discussed. We'll keep the conversation going. I'm Roby Alampay.
I'm Mami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Luchi Cruz-Valdes of News 5.
I'm Lingao. We are One News, all sides, all the time.